Gail?
Hi, my name is Gail Carter. I'm here with my husband Craig, and we wanted to welcome you to the Progressive Legacy of Silver Springs February meeting on Zoom. Special welcome to our guests tonight, and the members, and our special guests. Um, I believe William Roberts is on, but Will Jawando is not, correct? Oh, he just joined.
I'm on.
Hi, hi. How are
Hello.
you?
Good.
Okay. So before the recording has started, so everyone should be muted. Each candidate will be allowed, hopefully between 15 and 20 minutes to give us some background about their platforms. And while they're speaking, I'm going to try to interject the two questions that we've asked everyone. And then when we're done, we'll have a little bit of time for questions and answers. So I'd like to begin by introducing Councilman Will Jawando, who is the at-large representative at this time, and he's running for re-election. And he's lived in Montgomery. Well, if you want to, are you able to unmute yourself?
I am. Yes, I'm here. And so just so I'm clear, it's good to be with everybody. And congrats on, pulling this together, and appreciate your civic engagement. You want me to speak for how long about my background? I just want to make sure I'm respectful of the time.
Sure, you have 15 minutes, and if you don't include the two questions, the first two, three questions, I'll try to insert them when you're done.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Well, good to be with you all, and really appreciate you inviting me. And it's nice to be with my friend and namesake Will Roberts as well. And so I don't know if that was planned, but it's a good. I'm glad to be with him. And I'm Will Jawando. I'm an at-large member of the county council, as you mentioned, and I represent the whole county, and really proud of that. As you also mentioned, I was born and raised here. I grew up in the Long Branch area of Silver Spring, not too far from many of you in the Quebec Terrace area. Went to Oakview Elementary, St. Michael's when it was there, and then went to St. John's and Catholic University for law school and undergrad. So I've been working my way up and down New Hampshire Avenue for most of my life. And I'm a civil rights attorney by training. And that really comes from my experience growing up in our community, really benefiting from the great community that we are, but also seeing severe disparities and inequality as well, which is also a part of our community and was a part of where I grew up. And that stuck with me throughout my childhood, and kind of came to a head when I unfortunately lost one of my best friends in an act of gun violence as a teenager, who had grown up with me. And it really forced me to analyze, well, what are the reasons that I had such different outcomes, and what were the systemic and societal factors that led to the different outcomes. And I really honed in on educational opportunities that I had that he didn't have, and other friends didn't have. Things like after school programming that wasn't available, reliable public transportation, jobs that paid living wages, which meant she couldn't be around when he got out of school, and help him stay on track and not get involved in negative things. So I started to see how all these things were connected to his life outcome, and that many of them were policy and budgetary decisions that people made. People that I didn't know and didn't know how to access were deciding who got access to what and where. And when I realized that, it really upset me, and I didn't know exactly what I was going to do about it. But I've really been on a journey ever since, kind of a plus year journey trying to correct those systemic inequities and make those investments, whether it be at the federal, state, or local level. And I spent a lot of my early career working in the federal government, worked on Capitol Hill for some great folks, Nancy Pelosi, Sherrod Brown, and then Senator Barack Obama. And then I worked in the Obama White House in the Obama Department of Education, and then came close back to home and worked at Discovery Communications and did a lot of work with MCPS and the education practice there at Discovery. And then also have been working locally in the community, have founded several nonprofits. Our Voices Matter with my dear departed friend, John Randall, who's a great community activist, which worked in the 6 lowest income census tracts in the county to build civic engagement, and the African Immigrant Caucus to build civic representation, engagement, and activism within the African immigrant community, which is the largest in the nation here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, despite not having very much representation. And a few years ago, I created and ran the largest ever summer jobs program for high school students in the county called Summer Rise. And it's still going, and we're working to expand that. And now I'm in the great position to be able to fund that program on the council side. And so I've really dedicated my life to trying to improve life outcomes for every resident. It's really important to me. I think when we all do better, we really do all do better. And it's the kind of finishing that unfinished promise of America is what I've worked on. I call it the MoCo promise, a great school in every neighborhood, a safe and affordable and quality housing, a job that pays a living wage, and being able to retire with dignity. And I think we are a community where that's possible for everyone. We have the tax base, the highly educated population, the people like you all who care about their fellow resident to get that done. And I've been proud to be on the council for the last 3.5 years now, trying to do the best I can to do that in the midst of a pandemic, but also before that, making sure that government treats every resident fairly, and that we have what we need. And my son's just walked in here, so you want to say hi? Go ahead and say hi. Okay, say hi to everybody. All right, there you go. Okay, all right, go back. There we go. And I've done a lot on criminal justice reform, a lot on renter protections. I think one of the things COVID has shown us is that all the issues I talked about at the beginning that we've had, they just have been kind of exacerbated. And it's required us to do some things differently. And I'm proud that we've been able to do that. I introduced and passed the first criminal justice reform bill ever passed in the county's history. We went on to pass several more. We passed the first rent stabilization bill that applied countywide in the county's history that I authored. We passed a landmark use of force bill that changed the way our police interact with residents. We've also been able to create a great public-private partnership called Food for Montgomery that I initiated with a $10 million appropriation that has created over $2.5 million to public-private partnerships to help our farmers, to help our residents with food need at their food banks, and also help build a stronger food system. And so we've done quite a bit. There's more to do, and we have to invest in our small businesses, make sure that they can grow. We have to make sure we tackle health disparities that have been exposed during the pandemic. We need to make sure people can afford to live here in the county, and that people are treated fairly by any level of government, and whether it's police or HHS or no matter who you are, you should be treated fairly. We passed the Crown Act to protect hair discrimination. We strengthened our sexual harassment laws, something I worked on. So we've done a lot of things in that realm as well. I think we need to fix our tax system as well. We need to make sure it's more equitable and we have the revenue to make the investments in our community that we need. And so I kind of embedded some of what I want to work on in this. So tried to cover question one a little, and I'll try to cover question two as well. I serve on the Education and Culture Committee, and which is very important. I think, we have to make sure we have equitable education, that it's funded properly, that our educators are paid well, and that we have one of the top school systems in the nation, that we keep it there, and that realizing coming out of this pandemic, our kids need even more. Our kids are dealing with so much, and it's coming out in so many ways, whether it be their mental health, their academics, their socialization. We're seeing it. We are in a crisis. And so we're going to have to respond. Serious investments for our kids. And I also am on the Planning, Housing, Economic Development Committee. And we're going through a process now to talk about what the county will look like for the next 50 years and how people afford to live here, and how my kids and your grandkids and others can afford to live here, and what kind of transportation systems should we have, and what kind of jobs should we be growing and attracting. And those are all key issues for our long-term competitiveness that I enjoy serving on those two committees. So I hope to stay on those two committees and chair probably one of them in the next council if I'm reelected. And I'll pause there because I think I've probably done about 15 minutes. So thank you for having me and look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you so much, Will. As you see, Craig put in the chat, if you have a question for Will, can you please raise your hand, and we'll take a couple before we go to our next guest speaker.
Rosie?
I wanted to know how you're financing your campaign.
Oh, thank you, Rosie. Well, through people like you. No, we've done where I'm in the traditional financing system this time. I did the public financing last time, and I'm a big fan. I think all elections should be publicly financed at every level. We're not there right now. There was some question of how much money we'd be able to put in the public election fund during a pandemic. And so I thought at the time makes sense to let first-time candidates tap that money first. And so I'm in the traditional election fund. But I think people know enough about me that the special interests don't have any influence on what I do. I do what is right for the people. But we have a lot of grassroots donations, and I think this last quarter the last financing, we raised the most of any at-large candidate in that finance period. But we still need to keep pushing. It's a big county and a lot of people to talk to, and but yes, I appreciate that question, Rosie.
Before we go to Donna next, Will, I wanted to offer you the chance to, if you can do this, I don't know if you can do it while you're talking, put your information about any links or fundraising events coming up.
Nicole, who's sitting there smiling, Rios, my campaign manager, is here, and she can put in the chat all the fundraising stuff and all those things. And we're going to have a big event later this month, so we'll make sure for Black History Month, we'll make sure to invite everybody to that. But appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Donna, you want to ask your question?
You're on mute, Donna. It's not a Zoom meeting until someone's on mute talking.
Hello.
There we go. I think we got you.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to ask in terms of the priorities that your campaign will have, what are your plans in connection with the community's input as far as police conduct, trying to have impact from the community at the grassroots level, those who might be most affected by any reform in that area? What are your priorities in terms of having the community have greater?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Input.
Donna. That's a great question. I think number one job of an elected official at any level, but particularly a local elected official, is to connect and hear with residents. And we've done a lot of that. We put out a little graphic at the end of the year. We've done a lot of outreach. I think some of I did over 100 story times virtually. We've helped.
Hey, how are you? How are you?
Okay.
How are you?
I'm doing
I'm
well.
here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm
I
here.
think you might have.
You gotta get that. Get that.
Excuse me, everybody.
Gotta get a pepper.
Come on,
Please
man.
try
Get
to-
Pepper.
try to take care of
Mega.
Wow. No, don't mute me. Don't mute me. Don't mute me. Don't mute me.
it. No, you have to be muted.
Please, no. No, I'm here. I'm here for the meeting. Come on. Come on. We're here for the meeting. Hey, you're dusty. You're crusty. Come on. Come on. I got it.
Mega.
Okay. Did we get that person?
I am not sure, but keep talking, please.
Okay. Okay. So we've done a lot of outreach. We've helped a lot of people with casework. We held community roundtables, and we went to farmers markets, dozens of them around the county. We work on that really hard to get out to folks and hear from them. The council itself has taken some actions too. We created the police advisory committee, which every councilman, we appointed members, and they give us, they're all from the community. Over 200 people applied, and we appointed them. And they are giving us feedback. We're also about to implement the state passed police reform bill, which has a creation of a police accountability board, which will give recommendations on discipline when there are complaints involving residents, misconduct with residents. So that's a bill we're working through now, and we're taking a lot of community input on that. I've held several forums and roundtables on this issue. We're going to hold more. This only works if we engage the community, because the power that our police have to keep us safe, and as part of our broader community safety, it's a delegated power from the people, and we have to be in communication with them about how it's used. So we're going to keep doing that.
Thank you.
Looks like you guys got some hackers here.
Yes, we do.
I think
Thank
so.
you.
First time.
I serve.
Okay. I think we have that under control. People will not be able to see that. I will be removing some of these people. Including Mr. Hudson is the first one to be kicked off here. So let's go back. How are we doing? Council member, are you still here? We apologize for that. I think it's probably not unexpected. We did publicly share this link to try to get a large audience, and I think we've got the wrong person. So we have more questions. I see that Dio, do you have a question for Council Member Jawando?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't be seen, but you know, I was just thinking, Donna just made a point that I'm very interested in. And we see with the death of Amir Locke and countless others since George Floyd, that very little has changed in the area of increasing public safety and police accountability. So I just want to thank Council Member Will Jawando for everything that he's done. And I did testify in the last hearing on the police accountability bill. And I just want to know where that stands, because my focus was on getting input from the community rather than, as the bill then stood, getting those on the police accountability board and the administrative charging committee. Those were all going to be taken from those who had had prior experience with law enforcement. And I want to know, is there any change in that focus, or does it still remain as it was at that point when I testified?
Just a second. Just a second, Will, there we go. You can unmute.
All right, there you go. Yeah, you had everyone locked down there. I understand why. Thank you, Dio. Yes, and I appreciated your testimony. I've offered several amendments, and we're going to be working through that bill in committee. And one of the amendments I offered was that you don't have to, you can't be law enforcement or former law enforcement, that you don't have to have those requirements. I agree with you about the community input. There's going to be a lot of changes is the short answer. So we have a committee session coming up, I believe next week actually, on that. And we will be going through those amendments. And I think it's actually on, yeah, it's coming up soon. I don't want to give you the wrong date, but it's very soon. And that is one of the things that we'll be changing, as well as making the board a little larger, removing those kind of qualifications, removing law enforcement, because again, this is about community input here. And so those are getting an independent counsel, not having the same attorneys that represent the police staffing this body. So we're going to make sure that they're independent. So there's all those things are in the works. And I expect that we'll make a lot of those changes in committee over the next several weeks before it comes to full council. But absolutely, the testimony was, I think everyone that testified, it was very consistent. It was clear that people wanted to see real, have more community input and see a lot of changes with the bill. And I'll just point out that it's really important that you all stay engaged on those issues, because even the use of force bill that I passed with colleagues, the police union sued us saying that we shouldn't be able to say that you can't choke people and put knees in necks and de-escalate. Now, thankfully, we won just last week. The court ruled in our favor that we have the authority to pass that bill, but it just shows you that there's a lot of resistance to change. And the implementation is going to be just as, if not more important than the actual policy. You need to get the policy right, because you have to be able to hold people accountable and to the right standards. But the implementation is going to be key, particularly in this environment of refund the police, like Larry Hogan is saying. And, when we are seeing increased conflict and some increase in certain types of violence, people want to say, oh, it's a result of this or that. No, it's a result of the trauma of the last 20 months and us underfunding so many other systems and structures. And our police absolutely have a role, but the rules that they abide by and the reforms that need to happen also still need to happen. And I think, unfortunately, we're at a point now where you had a global outcry and we still haven't passed a federal bill. We still haven't, we had to watch George Floyd murdered for 10 minutes and we still haven't passed the bill in his name. And that shows you how entrenched these things are. And so all the 18,000 police entities, and we're one of them, the reform is going to have to happen at the grassroots level and continue to build. And so we're just scratching the surface of that. I'm proud of the bills we passed, but we have a lot of work to do, and a lot of attention needs to continue to be paid by the community. So I appreciate you asking that.
Okay, let me.
I know you've been busy, Alan. I know.
Wow, I got it. Thank you, Councilman Jawando.
Thank you.
I'll appreciate your time. I know you have a busy schedule. And I'm going to introduce the next guest now. It is William Roberts. He is running for position in District 2, which is Up County. I specifically asked a few people, I don't know if they're on from that area, and they may have questions for you later, William. You've been in Montgomery County since 2010. And if you could unmute yourself, tell us a little bit about your platform, and if you can, incorporate those first 3 questions.
Sure, certainly. Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me. Thanks so much for having me. And I see Councilmember Jawando might have dropped off, but just wanted to thank him, not just for his presentation, but for his work over the last number of years in the face of clearly, some ugly opposition that has taken, a clear racial overtone from what we've seen, mirrors what we've seen going on around the country, but no less important. And so just want to thank him for that. And I know Cecily and Nicole are here, so pass that on to Will, please. It's good to be with everyone here. I really appreciate the invite, Gail and Craig and Alan. And I'm William Roberts. And as you mentioned, I live Up County, running for the District 2 County Council seat, which is currently held by Councilmember Rice, who's term limited. The District 2 seat, even after redistricting, still contains basically what was Craig's district plus Poolesville, a little bit of North Potomac, and some of Travilla. So if you think about it, they moved us over a little bit. So we go from Clarksburg to Poolesville, down to North Potomac, taking a little bit of Travilla, and communities of Darnestown, Germantown, Clarksburg in there as well. I born and raised in Philadelphia, made it here to the area because I came for undergrad at Howard, and I met my wife, so I stayed. My wife Michelle and I met the second week, of undergrad at a movie night, and I was hooked. So I stayed in the area for undergrad, and then attended Howard Law, but born and raised in Philadelphia, to a working class family who, taught me the value of both giving back to my community and serving publicly, serving in the community. My dad was a barber by trade, a small business owner for a little bit of time. He had his own shop, but he also in his past had some interactions with the criminal justice system. And from that, learned about the value of making sure that folks who are interacting with the justice system, serving time, that making sure that when they come out, part of having them be able to be productive members of society is to have a trade. And so he worked back at home in Philly to help start one of the first vocational training programs for barbers in the Pennsylvania correction system. And as a kid, used to go up there with him when he'd have meetings, and my mom didn't like it too much, but he thought it was important to really show me sort of what was going on in society and how, giving folks opportunities to be able to better themselves made the difference. And so that really stuck with me. And I think it's why I chose a career in public service like Councilmember Jawando. I'm a civil rights lawyer by training. The only clients that I've ever represented have been folks in fair housing cases, actually, in Washington and in the surrounding areas here in Montgomery County and in Prince George's County, but have never, as a lawyer, represented a special interest. Just regular folks. And I've also spent a lot of time in my career on voting rights issues. In my day job, I work for the Center for American Progress, running their democracy program. But here in Montgomery County, my husband, father, community leader, as I mentioned, Michelle and I have a 3-year-old. Her name is Mackenzie. She keeps us on our toes, for sure. Were she here, she would want to be introduced on camera also. Little kids love Zoom calls. And I've been a fierce advocate for the Up County, where I'm proud to have made my home locally. Part of my career as well, worked on Capitol Hill, started years ago with Congresswoman Donna Edwards, actually, when she represented part of Montgomery County. And then very recently was Congressman Jamie Raskin's legislative director and chief counsel. And in that role, got a chance to work on a lot of issues that intersect from the state and local and federal level for the county. Helped, was talking to someone today about helping to get some additional funding for electrifying the ride-on fleet years ago. And so through that work with Jamie, really saw and understood the necessity for people who care about our community to step up and give back. And I've done that, working in various nonprofit capacities. I chair the Montgomery County Renters Alliance and been a huge advocate for tenants. Worked alongside Councilmember Jawando as an advocate to help push for that emergency stabilization. But also years before that, we worked on what's known as Bill 1915, which is really a seminal tenants' rights bill that was passed in the county years ago. And on the board of the Black Rock Center for the Arts and on the Manna Food Center's Advocacy Task Force. And so I've, through various vantage points, professional, civic, political, seen up close a lot of the issues going on in the county, and why we need new leaders with experienced perspectives to step up and lead, which is why I am running for the county council. When it was clear, certainly, that Councilmember Rice was term limited, and thinking about the best ways to help my community. I looked at sort of the issues going on up county in our communities. I think it's really important that we focus not just on sort of our top line factors of how we're doing economically, checking our metrics, but I measure the health of the county on the health of our families, right? How our families are doing, how regular folks and working people are doing. And, I saw that people needed an advocate. And so that's why I stepped up to run. There are lots of issues that I think we can be tackling. And the chief among them, if I had to pick 3, since I will, since you asked me to go, I think, of course, coming out of COVID, we got to be talking about revitalizing our economy and recovering from the pandemic. We are definitely, as we talk about, our economic health as compared to our neighbors, we see that we have, even pre-COVID, have been falling behind a little bit on some key indicators. And we know that persistent inequality exists in our community. Now, lots of us knew that before COVID, right? But COVID has really sort of exacerbated that and sort of opened, torn the lid off, opened the blinds on it, whatever euphemism you want to use, but really exposed to people the need that exists in our community, and made us think through how we need to be more creative about addressing it. And so I think that's important to keep in mind as we're also talking about, creating good jobs and growing our tax base. But I really think we need, as we talk about revitalizing our economy, to also talk about revitalizing our communities and helping them recover. The other thing certainly is, as we talk about economic development, which we'll talk about a lot in this election and every race, we need to think about economic development, I think, a little bit more expansively, right? As not just whether or not we're going to give incentives for companies to move here and bring jobs here, et cetera, what our tax policy is, but I think education is economic development, transportation is economic development, and those kind of investments in our communities. And so I want to sort of change the conversation that way. The other big issue certainly is education. And I think we've got to be talking about in our county how we can invest in a lifetime pursuit of education from, sort of infancy to career, cradle to career, as they say. My daughter, as I mentioned, is 3. I was about to officially enter pre-K in a little bit, and she'll be a future MCPS student. The decisions that we're going to make about the future of MCPS, how we close these gaps, is going to impact Mackenzie and her generation the most. And so I think it's really critical to, be, of course, investing in our school system and our kids and quality education, because it's of course, a huge driver of success. But also we need to be addressing the equity issues that we know exist in MCPS. We also need to be sort of taking better advantage of resources that we have, like Montgomery College and the universities at Shady Grove that both have campuses in my district, as we're thinking about how we train up that skilled workforce for the future, and help, foster partnerships and better collaborations to have more jobs here. And of course, we got to be working on school construction issues and issues of overcrowded schools. We know, you could pick a neighborhood. Brian and I were both on testifying before the county council today at the capital improvements plan hearing about schools in our districts that frankly need attention because they are oversubscribed and overcrowded. So those are real issues we got to address. And then, lastly, I think addressing certainly transportation and housing. I know those are 2 issues, but they're inextricably linked. And so, I think we've got to be thinking about our, transportation ecosystem and sort of centering mobility rather than modality, right? Like thinking about how do we move the most people in the safest and most efficient way. That includes investments in transit, that does include road capacity. As you all know, the up county is situated a little different than some of the denser areas down county. And so we're going to need more road capacity, but we're also definitely going to need real and significant investments in transit. And so, talking bus rapid transit, the quarter cities transit way up here. And there are folks who think that people up county don't care about transportation. Don't be fooled. We do, and we need it. And transit equity is important. If you look at the communities up county, especially as we've grown and grown more diverse, excuse me, we have lots of communities where folks have one car or no car and need to rely on transit to get around. And so it's really important that we have those investments, and of course, affordable housing for all the reasons that we know, because we are in an affordable housing crisis. And so we're going to need to build more housing types that people can afford. We're going to need to look out and make sure that both people who rent their homes and people who would like to be home buyers, first-time home buyers, can do that. And so those are a couple of things that I want to focus on for sure. Also happy to go where the work is. I'm so lucky to join the council, but really interested in joining the Fed committee that Councilmember Jawando was talking about, that deals with our economic issues and housing, and the education and culture or transportation and environment committees, because of some of the issues that they deal with there. So I'm happy to take questions. Hopefully that wasn't too much word salad for folks, but I'm just really happy to be with you.
Just a second as I try to get control of our Zoom here. I see that Donna, you'd like to ask a question? And you need to unmute yourself, and I think you should be able to do that now. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to ask a question regarding voting rights. A lot of the areas that our candidate just mentioned really strike a chord with me. However, I was interested to know from his campaign's standpoint, what is the view that his campaign has regarding the impact of voting rights on some of these areas, at least ultimately, if not immediately.
Will, are you, let me, this is turned on. Okay, there you go.
No worries. How we got to do it in the pandemic, and when you're fighting the trolls. So you're doing a great job. So I think voting rights does have something to do with that. Years ago, when I was, I think, president of the county's Young Dems, but the political director for the Black Democrats, we worked in coalition with a whole host of folks to beat back a decision that at the time was being made by some Larry Hogan appointees on the State Board of Election about shifting around polling places. Not the same fight that just went on in White Oak, but similar. And largely it was voter suppression happening even in Montgomery County, right? And so I think we do have to be on watch and on guard for that. Luckily in Maryland, we've got great leaders at Annapolis and at the local level who are doing, everything possible to expand the franchise, expand voting rights. We got mail-in balloting, et cetera. But I think also to your point is voter participation is part of that voting rights conversation. And so up county, the rap on our area is that not that many people vote, and that's why our issues and concerns get ignored. Excuse me. I think that certainly as our population has grown, we've got a lot of new people in. Some of our areas are fairly transient, but folks are coming in, coming out, moving around the county, trying to find affordability. For instance, we're talking about affordable housing. But I think it's really incumbent upon us, civically engaged and people who are elected or seeking elected office to reach out to those folks, right? Like the common political wisdom is, oh, if you're running for office, go after your super voters. Don't worry about folks who aren't really who don't come out that much, aren't that engaged. I think the opposite, frankly. I think that's one of the issues that we have in the county, and particularly up county, that there's one segment of our community that you hear the most on issues, right? But the other folks, who don't show up, aren't showing up because not showing up because they don't care, right? But they can't get to a council hearing at 1:30 in the afternoon or 7:30 because they are working, right? They don't have time necessarily to go to the community meeting because they're trying to get dinner on the table. And so I see it as my task in my campaign, win or lose, but certainly I intend to win, to be reaching out to those folks and talking about these issues that, I just talked about with you. And again, there are folks who say, well, up county is not that conducive to transportation. We're not really interested in bus rapid transit. We'd rather just talk about road construction. We definitely do need to talk about road construction and road infrastructure for people who are going to drive. But the notion that you can just take transit off the table erases a whole swath of people in my community. And so I'm trying to be a representative that puts those people back in the conversation.
Gail, you've been unmuted, but Dio, your hand is raised. You have a question? And if you do,
you can hear me now?
we can hear you now.
Okay, I really appreciate your extensive years of experience. During your presentation, you mentioned a need for increasing road capacity. What is your position on the P3 proposition for expanding I-495 and I-270?
Great question. Can you all hear me? Sorry, I don't know if I'm muted or not.
Yes.
Okay. So great question. I'll try to answer it as briefly as possible. So I started this way. When I was working for Congressman Raskin, Governor Hogan rolled out his I-270, I-495 P3, ostensibly to say he wanted to work on gridlock, which is a real issue. But the way he rolled it out and the way that over the years he's worked on it has shown that he doesn't see it as a real issue. He sees it as a political issue. And I think it's unfortunate because it's keying on something that is real, right? In my area, and I live in Clarksburg, so above, sort of 370 above the ICC. We have an issue of uncompleted or inadequate road infrastructure, right? We've got 355, which narrows between Clarksburg and Germantown to 2 lanes apiece. We've got the issues on 270. And so when people say, well, do we need increased capacity on 270? I say yes. I think increased capacity looks like transit on 270, free transit, but also some form of, I'm a proponent of the reversible toll lanes, just because the traffic is reversible in the morning. And as someone who, for 4 years, drove an hour and a half in the morning and an hour and a half at night, I'll tell you, it's no fun sitting in that traffic. And by the same token, if I had transit that could get me back and forth to Shady Grove, and not have to sit on 270 or drive all the way into the city, I would have taken it, right? And so I think that we do need increased capacity on 270. I don't think that the governor's P3 plan, as he laid it out, was the best plan. And so I've been watching the modifications that the council's been trying to make. The latest development a couple months ago was that they sort of struck this agreement to get more money for transit projects, particularly up county. And one of the projects on the list is the Quarter Cities Transit Way, which is essentially, it was started as a light rail plan, but it's essentially now a rapid bus that goes all from Clarksburg all the way down. And so yes, but I do, to answer your question, I do think that we need increased capacity. I think we got to talk about what that looks like, though. And this is one of those issues, right, where in Montgomery County we like to get into our silos and have the fights that we've been having for a long time, right? And we say, well, if you think that we need a stitch of asphalt, then you must not be for transit or the environment, and vice versa. If you want to protect the environment and support transit, then you must not understand that certain people can drive, right? We know neither is the truth. And so as a collective community, but also as a political body, I think that it's incumbent upon the council to sort of drive that productive conversation in the center to talk about what kind of multimodal approaches we need. I hope that answers your question a little bit, or a lot of it.
Thank you, Will, for that wonderful answer. And I have one more question from Joel Teitelbaum. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Is that okay? It says the host not allowing me.
We can hear you, Joe.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Alan, and thank you all. I came late to this event, but I have a question, if it hasn't been asked already, for both candidates or any candidates. What is your position on the MNC PPC Planning Board leadership, in particular after this court decision that they've been playing fast and loose with the rules and haven't followed the regulations on transparency or hearings, or including a large number of Montgomery County residents and others in their decision-making, and also their lack of outreach? What is your position on that, and on any future appointments that you might want to make as a council member? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. That's a great question. So I've been, I'm familiar with this issue, put it that way. I think that certainly, but although I haven't read the decision yet, but I think that from what I know, that there has been some transparency lapses, and I think it's key, both as a body of citizens, that we've got full faith in the integrity of our processes, our public processes. And so, I want to see whatever those lapses were corrected. In terms of the lack of outreach, I assume, or I shouldn't assume, but maybe I should ask if that has to do with Thrive or other things that have been going through the planning board. And look, I think while I think it's been very difficult to reach folks in the pandemic to talk about what's going on in our government, I think it is key to do so, and key to make sure we're doing an extra push of outreach when we're talking about something as important as the Thrive Plan and other things that go through the planning board. So I think in general, not just for the planning board, but also for the council, I think it's really important, excuse me, as we go forward, how we're going to transition this virtual to hybrid, because God willing, we'll get back to something like normal life, right? But how we're going to keep and transition these virtual spaces. So that, from what I understand, at least from the planning board's perspective, some of the virtual interface aspect had something to do with their position there. But I think, for instance, on the council, we should be keeping virtual options for hearings. As I mentioned before, folks aren't able to get down to the council at 1:30 in an afternoon to testify, the same as, to go to the planning board in the middle of the afternoon or evening. And so I think it has been good for public participation and for transparency for people to be able to tune in and key in online. But I don't think we should just sort of rely on the fact that there are 100 people on a Zoom and count that as outreach, right? The other thing in terms of planning board appointments, that's a great question. I think that what I want to see is folks who, one, understand communities, two, understand the necessity to have open conversations about things that might be difficult, right? We talked about some of the land use issues and transit, et cetera. I do think on our land use policy, we do like, again, to be in our silos and sort of feel self-satisfied at throwing our darts. And I think we got to sort of tear some of those down to have real conversations about how we move forward. But I think, it's really important to have folks on the planning board who, fully understand what's going on in communities. So hope that answers that. Oh, Gail, you're still mute.
That's right. We've got, there you go, Gail. Gail.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you so much, William, for your thoughts, for sharing your thoughts and allowing us part of your Tuesday evening.
Yeah,
I know.
absolutely. Can I just add one thing? Sorry, I know you're on a tight schedule. Just because the question was asked earlier, I think it's a good one. So I am running under the public financing system. I'll make sure to drop my information in the chat. I was actually a leader of a coalition that was called the Fair Elections Maryland and Fair Elections Montgomery coalition back in 2014, 2015. And we worked with grassroots organizations and with Phil Andrews to actually pass the public financing system. And so as an advocate and a lawyer, was involved in creating the system because we wanted to see community-based candidates like the ones you're hearing from the night being able to run and not having to, use special interest money to do so. And so I'm one of those candidates. Never thought when we were working on the system that I'd be running for office, but that's how stuff happens. So I'm excited to be using it, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you. I hope for the Up County folks, but everybody, hope I'll put my information in the chat, hope to hear from you, but I think it's really important, even if you don't live in the district, to know what other district council members are doing, because we're going to make decisions that impact the entire community, the entire county.
Thank you. And Alan, he can't use the chat, right? The chat's disabled.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You should be able to. We'll see.
Let me try. If I can't, it's still disabled, and maybe keep it disabled just in case there's somebody hanging out. But for anybody who's interested in reaching out, my website is williamjroberts.org. You can shoot me an email there. Our information is on there. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter at William J. Rob. Or you can ask Alan and Gail.
And we will send out the information. Gail, are you unable to speak again? So here we go. Try now.
Okay, thank you again. Thank you very much. And I want to introduce our last guest speaker. Thank you for your patience, Brian. And I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your last. It's Anleu or Anleu?
Either one. Anleu's fine.
Anleu. And he's running in District 5 for a position on the council. And you've lived here in Montgomery County for how long?
For about 25 years, with the exception of a small period of time between kindergarten and third grade. I've lived here in the county pretty much my entire life.
Okay, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your platform, and if you can, answer the two questions, at least the first two.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So I am running for District 5, the new District 5, which runs from the Beltway northeast along 29 up to the Howard County line. So it includes Hillendale, White Oak, Fairland, Burtonsville, Cloverly, Colesville, and then it goes over west along Lay Hill and Route 28 and over to Leisure World. So it's about 2/3 of the current District 5 and about 1/3 of Nancy Navarro's district and also Councilmember Katz's district. He represented Leisure World. And I apologize in advance, like Will Roberts and Will Jawando. I have 2 young children at home with me, ages 5 and 12. So if you hear any background noise or any interruptions, those are my 2 children. So a little bit about me. I grew up in the East County. As I said, I grew up in Hillendale. I'm back living in the home that I grew up in. And for a little while lived in Burtonsville for about 10 years. So pretty much have spent most of my time along this 29 corridor. I have dedicated my entire adult career after college to public service, serving the community, serving on and helping working families in particular. I worked for about 5 years on Councilmember Tom Hucker's staff, leaving in 2019 as his deputy chief of staff. And most recently, I was serving as chief of staff to the planning board. I am no longer at the planning board. I'm taking leave to campaign full time. And so I'm out talking to neighbors and voters. I apologize, 1 second.
We love children.
Thank you. Sorry about that. That was my 5-year-old. And so, as I said, I was chief of staff to the planning board. I'm no longer working there. I'm campaigning full time through the primary, and we'll see what happens after that. In terms of my platform and what I'd like to do and my top 3 priorities, first is I'd like to deliver more resources to the East County, both capital and operating resources. There's a sentiment as I'm talking to my neighbors that East County has been neglected. A lot of the investment, both private and public sector investment, has gone to West County and other parts of the county. And so for me, I'd like to deliver additional resources, as I said, on both sides of the budget. Will mentioned the capital budget hearing today. The 3 things I advocated for were 1, the completion of the 2 additions at Greencastle and Burtonsville Elementary. Both of those are long overdue. They've been on the books for almost 10 years. I also asked for the completion of the Burtonsville Access Road, which is an important traffic safety and economic development project for the Burtonsville area. It'll allow safer ingress and egress out of the commercial properties along 198. And then lastly, I asked for additional funding for bike and pedestrian improvements in tier 1 projects, particularly those in equity focus areas. In addition to delivering more resources, I would like to focus on making housing more attainable. And that's not just that just doesn't just mean making it more affordable. I apologize, 1 second.
We love children.
Again, sorry about that. She had throughout that entire 1 hour period, she was doing all right, but then she heard me speaking and of course decided she wanted something. So again, I sincerely apologize for that. So making housing more attainable. We have an affordability crisis here in the county that our lowest income residents can't afford to live here, but our middle income residents also have a hard time finding housing options. It's, they're increasingly getting squeezed out because there just isn't enough housing supply to meet demand. Houses are going through the roof in terms of their costs. You're seeing bidding wars. And so it's not uncommon for houses to go, 10, 15, 20% above their list price. And I saw this firsthand myself when I sold my house in Burtonsville. My modest townhome in Burtonsville that I bought for about $250,000 about 8 years ago sold for $100,000 above that and well above list. So I think you're increasingly seeing all families and households getting squeezed out of the county. And then third, I'd like to focus on more economic development. There aren't as many jobs in the East County and economic centers of activity. a lot of people in East County have to go up to Howard County, for example, to go shopping or for a nice white tablecloth meal, or sometimes they'll go to Laurel, sometimes to Silver Spring, sometimes to DC. We don't have a lot of those amenities and options in the East County. So delivering more jobs and more economic development. So those are sort of the top 3 priorities on my list. The second question was what committees I'd like to serve on. First is the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee, also known as the FED Committee, in part because of my background and experience both at the planning board and at the council working on those issues. Like Will, I've worked a lot on renter rights issues. While I haven't been I've been a homeowner primarily, I know that renters, absolutely need and deserve stable housing. And unfortunately, some of the housing conditions we're seeing in the county just are not up to par. So housing is a very important, near and dear issue to my heart. And then the second committee would be public safety. Public safety is something that the East County in particular is grappling with. There's a number of crime hotspots. And the East County has been seeing this not just during the pandemic, but for many years before that too. Most people don't realize that the East County was averaging about 3 homicides a year for like the past 6 or 7 years. And so it's something that we certainly grapple with and have challenges with. And Councilmember Jawando touched on some of the ways that those issues can be addressed. And so I think public safety is hugely, incredibly important to the East County and East County residents. So those are the top 2 committees I'd like to serve on. I think that covers the questions, but some of the questions that we've gotten, I'm also publicly financed. I believe in fair elections. I've been at the council when some of the modifications were made to the public financing program to make it a little bit more inclusive and a little bit not easier for first-time candidates, but a little more forgiving, if you will. Some of the first-time users in 2018 were unfortunately disqualified inadvertently from the program. And so making it a little bit fairer and more accessible to people. So I'm a publicly financed candidate, and I'm open to any questions or concerns that you all have.
Thank you so much, Brian, for being here with us today. I'm trying to facilitate Gail's chair. Okay, Gail. When you unmute, Gail, you should be fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I see a question from Joel. You got to unmute yourself.
Let's see, I have to let him do that. Okay, Joel, you should be okay to unmute.
Okay, I'm unmuted. So I'd like to ask Brian the same question that I asked of Mr. Roberts. Basically, in light of the court decision, what is your understanding of what the leadership did wrong at the planning board and how to fix it? And having worked there, as you say, as chief of staff or representative to the planning board, what did you see that you would fix at the planning board beside getting rid of the current leadership? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question. So for those that don't know, there were sort of 3 issues that have been brought to the planning board's attention that need to be improved for transparency's sake. The first deals with the lobbying requirement and registration requirement. That's something that's been a part of the planning board's ethics policy for the last 40 or so years. Unfortunately, up until now, it has not been implemented by any board or any leadership. That's not an excuse. When it was brought to the board's attention, that's something that the board, and when I was there as chief of staff, was working on implementing, is that allows additional lobbying disclosures. I will tell you all that generally anyone that comes before the board is required as part of their registration process to disclose what groups, or whether it's a community group or a paid job that they represent. And there are also other state ethics disclosure requirements as well. So that's something that the board and the general counsel for the commission is actively working on. And it's somewhat of an IT issue because there has to be a database that has to be essentially put up and managed internally by staff. So the board's working on that. I think your question about the courts, I'd like to explain that a little bit as well. So it wasn't that a court found that the board did anything wrong. It was actually the state's Open Meetings Compliance Board, which is not a judicial body. It is it's essentially a compliance board that helps deal with open meetings, potential violations, and essentially what the Open Meetings Compliance Board found is that the planning department, not the board, was running afoul of the open meetings law by having development review committee meetings not being broadcasted online or not being as accessible as they could be. And so for those that don't know, the Development Review Committee is a interagency stakeholder work group. It involves not just the planning department staff, but also SHA staff, WSSC, the Department of Permitting Services, any agency of county government or state government that is involved in the review of a development project is a part of the DRC. And so the board itself is actually, and myself as chief of staff, it extends to me as well. We're precluded from participating in DRC meetings by the board's ex parte communications. And so what that means is that you nor a developer or an applicant can have one-on-one conversations with board members or their direct staff, like the chief of staff in this situation. And it has to be with the DRC staff. So the Open Meetings Compliance Board basically found that those DRC meetings need to be a little more transparent. They need to be more accessible online. And so the planning department started broadcasting and videotaping those in December. And now anyone who wants to attend or view a DRC meeting can do so. And then the last thing was that the county council wrote to the planning board about the consent agenda. The consent agenda, for those that don't know, is essentially a mechanism that allows hearings to be sped up a little bit more. And so when there isn't any opposition or there's an issue that is somewhat non-controversial, either because no one has signed up to speak or we just haven't heard from anyone about it, it's placed on the consent agenda and approved sort of by acclamation, if you will. It's just generally passed along. Now, that doesn't mean that items that are put on the consent agenda can't be removed from the consent agenda and addressed. They certainly can be whenever anyone brings those issues up with the board or the staff. The item is removed and then there's an actual hearing on it. So there's been a little bit of back and forth between the general counsel at the commission and at the county council on what those hearings should look like, and that's all getting worked out. I am not an attorney, so I won't pretend to be, and I'll let the attorneys sort of sort that out. But that generally covers the three issues that I think Joel was touching on. Happy to answer any additional questions on that. I will tell you, having worked for the board for the past almost 3 years, I think we have pretty good leadership that's very forward thinking. And on the outreach component of that, I can tell you there was a lot of outreach done on Thrive. In particular, it was a 2-year-long outreach effort that included mailings, it included meetings with neighborhood groups, it included an online toolkit, a survey. So there has been a lot of community engagement. Obviously, the staff and the board, everyone is open to more engagement and reaching out to different folks and hearing from folks. So just because Thrive is at the council doesn't mean it's the end. It's just, it's at that sort of next step. So I think that addresses all of your questions, Joel.
Well, actually, it doesn't. What about changing the leadership? What we've been seeing is an autocratic planning board under this chair and the prior vice chair, in which they talk down, or shall we say, slam down on citizens and suck up to the council. And you haven't revealed anything about the inner workings yet, but did you not see that kind of behavior on the part of Mr. Anderson toward citizens or the previous vice chair? I was appalled by it. Thank you.
Yeah, the previous vice chair is running for council. I'm not sure, how that race is going. It's a totally separate district. I'm not sure how that'll turn out. I wouldn't want to alienate any of my potential future colleagues or comment on them. I can tell you that I think that in general, our civic discourse in the county has gotten out of hand on a number of different sides, not just from the board, but also from the community and a lot of people. I'll tell you that the board, that the chair is term limited. Term limits were included in the chair position because there's a recognition that anyone who serves in that position for too long, could come under undue influence or anything like that. And so the chair's term expires on August 2023, at which point the next council will have an opportunity to appoint a new chair. And, if a member of the existing board moves up to potentially serve as chair, then the council would also appoint that person's replacement as well. And planning board member appointments happen pretty frequently. They're staggered, so there's about one every year. And I think like Will, I also am supportive of someone who's willing to listen to the community, hear everyone's concerns, bring people together, try to find consensus, try to find common ground, and address issues. I also think geographic diversity is important in terms of our board members. We have board member Commissioner Tina Patterson, who's from the Up County. I don't know that we've had someone from the East County in recent memory. I think that'd be great. Since I'm running for the District 5 seat that represents East County, I think it'd be great to have someone who has lived in the East County and can address planning board issues and parks issues as well, because they're also important and under the purview of the board from the East County. So that's what I would say about that.
Okay, well, I thank you for your comments. You gave a good discussion of the generalities. You're obviously not being willing to go into the misleadership, the bad leadership that's caused so much anxiety and upset around this county. And as far as I'm concerned, you were working for the wrong people when you worked for people like Anderson. He needs to leave that board as soon as possible. He's a disgrace to this county. Thank you. He doesn't believe in the county's idea of how you deal with people.
Thank you, Joel. I see that Cheryl Gannon's got a question. Is that okay, Gail? Cheryl?
Yeah, in terms of the lobby registration system that's being discussed, has there been any discussion about having it retroactive for some period of time? Because I realize at a hearing, someone may say who they represent, but in discussions with planning board staff and lobbying individually, the purpose of the transparency is the public doesn't see that or know about it. And meals and gifts, all of that stuff is now not anywhere disclosed. So I'm wondering if you know whether or not there'll be a request to ask people to file their reports for some period of time retroactively, or is it just forward?
I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that. Again, as I said, that's for the attorneys and some of the management to decide at this point. And since I'm not at the planning board currently on the staff, I'm not too sure where the discussions on that stand. I do want to just go back to a point that Joel made about working for the wrong people. As I'm sure all of you can appreciate, you're not always going to agree with your boss 100% of the time on 100% of things. Even, working for someone like Councilmember Hucker, who I deeply admire and respect, we had differences of opinions on things, but I think your role as a staff member is to try to serve your leadership and managers as ably as possible. And I feel that I've done that throughout my career and have been able to accomplish things on behalf of the community as much as I can. And so while I hear you, Joel and Cheryl and others on your concerns about the board, I'm not always going to agree with my bosses on 100% of things, but I'm running as a totally separate person for the District 5 council seat. And so that's the last I'll say about that.
Thank you very much, Brian, for that wonderful answer. Is that sufficient, Cheryl? Okay. Marilyn, are you still on? I saw your hand up. Marilyn Steele, are you still on? I don't see her. Okay. All right. Keku, I see your hand raised. Okay.
Let me unmute you or try. Keiko, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
I wanted to thank Brian for that explanation because I didn't know what all those letters meant at all. So I thought that was fantastic. I don't know if you're a teacher, but that was really good explanation. So nice and clear. I also want to thank all the candidates for having their kids pop in, because what that means to me that all you are actually active fathers. So I thought that was wonderful, but I really enjoyed your explanation of the planning board issue. It was really, I learned a lot. Thank you so much.
So Brian, I've got a question for you, like sort of getting back on track in District 5. What's your vision for the part of Burtonsville where the Burger King is, the old Giant site, and Viva White Oak? We haven't seen a lot of activity. We've seen a lot of discussion. We haven't seen a lot of activity there over the course of the last 10 years. I'm sure you've given that a lot of thought. What's your vision for the White Oak project and for doing something in that part of Burtonsville?
Yeah, thank you. So I actually co-founded the Better Burtonsville Association. I'm still an active member. I'm not as involved in the group, obviously because I'm a candidate for office. But a little bit about the Better Burtonsville Association. In 2019, the group partnered with the county to organize a placemaking festival at the Burtonsville Crossing Shopping Center that drew over 3,000 attendants over 2 days. It was the most energy and excitement, I think, that had been at that property in nearly 10 years. That property, unfortunately, has a long, complicated history that stems back to when Giant occupied the anchor space on the strip center and then moved over across the street and instituted covenants on the property that restrict another grocer from being placed there. And so in terms of the things that I would do, the first is I'd work with the county executive. If elected, the first thing I'd do is I'd work with the county executive to pass what's called a TIF, tax increment financing plan. They've been used in other parts of the county and in other counties. They've been used, I think, most recently in downtown Silver Spring to finance some of the improvements that you see today in downtown Silver Spring that led the downtown area to what it is today. They've also been used in Maple Lawn, for those of you that are familiar with Maple Lawn, to help finance the garage construction in that area that helped unlock the development potential of that area. And they're used pretty frequently in Prince George's County. Unfortunately, they're not used as frequently in Montgomery County for a lot of different reasons. But the first thing I do is work with the county executive to get a TIF done to get a garage built on the park and ride site, with the idea being that we want to attract people that are heading south on 29 to use the BRT and park at that garage. It's a place that the existing park and ride is somewhere between 75 and 90% utilized. This is pre-pandemic, obviously, but I think it still gets a good amount of use. And so that creating a garage there would help unlock some of that redevelopment potential, particularly on the Burtonsville Crossing site. The second thing is I'd ask the Department of Housing to do an economic impact study to look at what have been the costs to neighboring property owners, both commercial and residential, of having that property sit vacant and blighted for almost 10 years. Because I think what that study would reveal is that the impact has been negative, that it has depressed housing values, it has depressed commercial values. And so what that would do is it would lay the groundwork for potentially eminent domain or using county resources to break the covenants that are on that property to allow the property to finally move forward. With that said, I know there have been discussions with the current property owner, Edens, to finally get a grocer in there, and they're fairly confident that they're close to signing one. There are, again, because I said there are covenants on the property, limitations on the size of the grocer, and the type of grocer. There can be a Walmart, for example, there, or a Safeway. Giant made sure to exclude those types of competitors. But I'm fairly confident that a small format grocer would do just as well. And so I think things are heading in the right direction. But if elected and they're not, and we're having this conversation a year from now, like I said, I'm absolutely committed to taking as much action as possible to get that project moving forward. I've worked on that project for quite a while, and it's just a shame that it hasn't moved forward. The last thing I'll say to the comments about being an active father, my daughter's probably one of the more civically engaged 5-year-olds you'll meet. I have pictures of her in my arms at 6 months old at community meetings, and so she's something special, and maybe one day she'll be up here and it'll be her turn. But again, I apologize for the disruptions and also for being late. I was picking up my children from school, but thank you all so much for having us.
Wait a minute,
I
Gail.
got it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. A little story about my own son. He was 5 years old on the picket line with his father in the newspaper. So keep her active. Keep her active. I don't know. Is everyone still on here, Alan? I can't.
We've got 29 people still on the call.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, yes, and we also need to put your information for your candidacy, Brian.
So I also can't type. It looks like the chat is disabled, but my website is fairly easy. It's brianforcouncil.com, and that's with Brian with an I and for spelled out, Brian, FOR, council.com. So please check it out, not just for donations, but also check out both some of the work that I've done and what I hope to accomplish. I think what you'll find is that in my race, at least, I'm one of the most experienced candidates in the race in terms of working on county policies, budgets, and policy initiatives, legislation. I've helped pass over 12 pieces of legislation in my career on things from the environment to renters' rights to lead levels in schools. And so please check those things out, brianforcouncil.com.
And Brian, we will circulate all of your information. So thank you for participating. Gail, do you want to make some closing remarks, and then we'll end the recording, and then we'll continue our conversation briefly?
Well, what's been done is we allow each guest to make a closing remark. But I don't know, he's the only one that's still there?
Well,
I think Will's on the call still. And I kind of used my time to make a closing remark. So I'll pass the mic over to Will. But thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Brian. Councilman Jawando?
Jawando, I don't think is here, but Will Roberts is here.
William, are you still there?
Okay, so I have to unmute you, so we'll give it a second. Here we go. Will, you can unmute now.
All righty. I'll take council member though. You can keep that, Gail. I'll claim it. We'll touch and agree on it. So I just want to thank everybody again. I had to hang out to hear my buddy Brian. And so folks know, Brian and I go way back. We were both on the board of the County Young Dems together back when we were actually young. It's just been really great to see the work that he's been doing, the work that Councilmember Jawando has been doing, and in this for similar reasons as my friends here, that we really care about this county. I really care about this county, and I think that we need in this moment new leaders to step up who have lots of experience, but a new perspective. In my race, there are less people running than in Brian's race, so there's another candidate running that's been around for a good bit, but I can tell you that I'm the candidate in my race that's got the deepest policy background and the best ability to represent the maximum amount of communities up county, because I understand lots of issues that various folks are going through and lots of ways that we can talk about how we are expanding out opportunity. And so I really hope that you, again, take a look at my website. It's williamjroberts.org, again, to check out our issues page and see how I detail some other things that we didn't get a chance to talk about there, but would love to hear from you about your perspective on issues. And also, if you're so inclined, would love to have your support. Hey there, Mackenzie is upstairs, and so I can't bring her down, but I can hear her footsteps over me. And so, I also think it is sort of cosmically relevant. All of us, our kids represented here, because, another reason I'm doing this is because of their generation, right? Like, I want, Mackenzie, Brian's kids, Will's kids to be able to grow up in this county, have more opportunities, and be able to stay, right, and come back. And so I'm speaking for my friends, but I appreciate the time and the opportunity to be with you, and hope to have your support. If you've got friends up county, give them a shout and let them know that there's a candidate that they should take a look at in District 2.
I want to thank everybody for their time today. We spent a little bit longer than normal, but I think we had a well-rounded group of representation. Since everybody knows everybody, that's a bonus, and hopefully they'll share that